In early 1950, in the heart of Louisville, a red and white Schwinn bike got stolen, leaving behind a trail of destiny. This wasn't just any bike, it was the prized Christmas present of a 12-year-old boy. The loss cut deep, but little did he know, it was the beginning of a journey to greatness. This is where the story of Muhammad Ali, the GOAT of boxing and a 3-time world heavyweight champion, begins. Now, fueled by the sting of losing his new bike, little Muhammad Ali stormed down to the local police station. He even declared to the policeman Joe Martin that he was going to whoop whoever took his bike, but Officer Joe Martin wasn't any ordinary policeman. Officer Martin also teaches young boys to box in his spare time, and so he gave him a slice of advice: you better learn how to fight before you start challenging people. That moment sparked the transformation of Cassius Clay into Muhammad Ali. Under Martin's guidance, the young boy who just wanted his bike back began to punch not for revenge, but for glory. He'd dance like a butterfly and sting like a bee, all the way to the top. But his journey from an underdog to a champion wasn't an easy one. He faced much hardships, challenges, and personal struggles that you guys can even imagine, but still he overcame with his sheer dedication and tireless effort. And that's just the first chapter in his epic tale of winning 56 fights in a 21-year career. But to truly understand what he goes through and how he rises to the status of the legend, we have to start from his early life. Now, when Muhammad Ali was born on January 17, 1942, his parents named him Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. But little did they know he'd grow up to become Muhammad Ali, a name that would echo through the ages. Now this Cassius kid was something else. He was a firecracker, always bouncing on his toes, ready for a scrap. See, times were tough back then, especially in the South where segregation was the ugly law of the land. Young Cassius got a bitter taste of inequality early on, but instead of breaking him, it just fueled his fire. Now when Cassius was just a 12-year-old, fate decided to play a little game. His bike got pinched and boy was he steamed. He went to a local cop, a fella by the name of Joe Martin, and declared he was going to whoop whoever took his ride. Now, Officer Martin wasn't just any cop, he coached boxing on the side. He took one look at this fuming kid and said something like, "You want to throw down challenges, you better learn to throw punches." And that's exactly what Cassius did. He started training with Martin, learning the ropes of boxing. It wasn't long before he stepped into the ring for his first amateur fight in 1954. And guess what? He won that bout by the skin of his teeth, a split decision. But a win's a win, and it was only the beginning. Cassius kept at it, throwing jabs, hooks, and uppercuts, not just in the ring, but at life. In 1956, he clinched the Golden Gloves tournament for newbies, and by 59, he was the top dog at the National Golden Gloves and snagged the Amateur Athletic Union's national title. All while he was still a high schooler. Speaking of high school, Cassius walked the halls of Central High in Louisville. But he wasn't much for algebra or science. His mind was always in the ring. He'd float like a butterfly down the corridors, shadowboxing instead of studying. His grades were so rocky that at one time teachers even thought about flunking him. But the principal, Mr. Atwood Wilson, he saw the spark in Cassius. He once quipped to the staff, asking if they really thought he'd run a school that didn't graduate Cassius Clay. He knew this kid was going to be somebody, and he wasn't about to let him slip through the cracks. So it wasn't long before his lightning-fast jabs and dancing feet caught the eye of the U.S. Olympic boxing team selectors. And guess what? In 1960, our boy Cassius was on a plane headed for Rome, about to represent his country on the world's biggest stage. Now, Clay was a sight to behold in that ring. A towering figure at 6 feet 3 inches, with moves that could make a butterfly seem clumsy. He breezed through his first 3 fights like a hot knife through butter. Then came the final showdown, and standing between him and glory was Zbigniew Pietrskowski from Poland. But Cassius was on fire that time. In a whirlwind of fists and footwork, he clinched the gold for the light heavyweight division. Imagine that. A kid from the segregated South, standing tall with the world at his feet. Coming home, Clay was the toast of the town, a true American hero. His gold medal victory made waves, and it wasn't long before professional promoters were knocking on his door. Backed by the Louisville sponsoring group, a bunch of local businessmen who saw his potential, Cassius stepped into the professional ring. And he wasn't just part of the show, he was the show. Fight after fight, he dazzled crowds and sent opponents packing, proving that the Olympic gold was just the beginning. This was the rise of a legend, and everybody who was anybody wanted to see what Cassius Clay, soon to be Muhammad Ali, would do next. As Cassius Clay was basking in the glory of his Olympic success and starting to shake up the world of professional boxing, his path crossed with another formidable figure, Malcolm X. It was at a rally in Detroit back in June 1962 that Clay first heard Malcolm X speak. The man's courage, the power in his voice, it left Clay absolutely floored. The two struck up a friendship, the kind that changes you. Malcolm X, with his fierce conviction, brought Clay into the fold of the Nation of Islam, a movement that was demanding civil rights for Black Americans in no uncertain terms. Malcolm even had one of his guys keep an eye on Clay's daily business, making sure the boxer stayed on track. Now fast forward to 1964, a big year for Clay. As he geared up for the fight of his life against Sonny Liston in Florida, Malcolm X swung by with his family to show some support. When Clay claimed the World Heavyweight Championship belt from Liston, it wasn't just about boxing anymore. That victory was bigger than the ring. It was a statement, a thunderclap. That very night in a hotel room in Miami, Clay, Malcolm X, football legend Jim Brown, and soul singer Sam Cooke huddled together. They talked deep into the night about success, responsibility, the weight of being a Black icon. This meeting was so powerful it sparked the imagination of creatives years later, becoming the center of the play One Night in Miami and the later film adaptation. Come morning, with the new day came a new identity for Clay. He stepped out into the world as a member of the Nation of Islam, ditching Cassius for Cassius Clay and soon after, Muhammad Ali. But here's the kicker. His loyalty was to Elijah Muhammad, the nation's leader, not Malcolm X, who was on his way out. As quick as their friendship formed, it crumbled away, leaving them to walk separate paths by the springtime. When Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965, Ali didn't show much public sorrow, a reaction he'd look back on with deep regret. In his memoir, Soul of a Butterfly, years later, he confessed that turning his back on Malcolm was a decision that pained him deeply, a misstep he wished he could undo. As the tides of time flowed, Ali's faith journey continued, leading him to embrace Orthodox Islam in the 1970s. It was a testament to his relentless search for truth, a path of spiritual exploration that would define much of his life beyond the ring. Now, after all that drama with Malcolm X and his deep dive into faith, Muhammad Ali didn't shy away from controversy. In fact, he was just warming up. Picture this, it's 1966, and there's Ali, lounging on a couch, gesturing at a newspaper headline that's screaming about a Vietnam War protest. There he is, the champ, making a stand without even throwing a punch. You see, when Uncle Sam called his name for the draft in April 1967, Ali stood firm. "Nope, not going," he said. "I'm a Muslim minister, and my religion says I can't fight in no war." Of course, the authorities didn't take kindly to that. They slapped handcuffs on him, calling it a felony, and before he could float like a butterfly again, they'd stripped him of his title and his right to fight. The government was all over Ali, like a bad suit, rejecting his plea to be a conscientious objector. They wanted him behind bars for 5 years. He was sentenced in June 1967, but Ali wasn't about to roll over. He stayed out living on the edge of freedom, while his lawyers duked it out in the courts. Boxing was his life, but now the ring was out of bounds. With his career on pause, Ali found himself a home on the south side of Chicago. Those years, they weren't lost, though. He stayed sharp, coaching, sparring with anyone who was up for it, keeping that flame burning. Then came a crack of light in the darkness. Georgia, sweet Georgia, didn't have the rules that were keeping Ali down. So in 1970, they said, "Come on down." On October 26th at Atlanta's City Auditorium, Ali laced up his gloves and danced under those bright lights once more, taking down Jerry Quarry. The real knockout came a few months later. In June 1971, the Supreme Court did an about-face and tossed out his conviction. Just like that, Ali was back, free to compete, free to chase glory, free to be the greatest once again. And rolling with the punches from his court victory, Ali was ready to rumble again. And boy, did he pick a big fight for his comeback. On March 8, 1971, the whole world tuned in to witness Ali step into the ring with Joe Frazier. They called it the fight of the century, and it lived up to the name. They duked it out like titans, but in the 15th round, Frazier's left hook sent Ali to the mat. Ali got up, but it wasn't enough to sway the judges. For the first time in his professional career, Ali tasted defeat. But you know Ali wasn't going to let that stand. He faced Frazier 2 more times. First, he squared off against Ken Norton, who handed him a loss. But Ali bounced back and outboxed Frazier in their second match in '74. Then came the final act of their trilogy, the Thrilla in Manila, on October 1st, 1975. It was brutal, both men giving it their all. But in the end, Frazier's corner called it quits, and Ali was once again the victor. In between those epic brawls with Frazier, Ali faced a giant, George Foreman. October 30th, 1974, in Kinshasa, Zaire, the Rumble in the Jungle was set. Ali was the underdog, but he turned the tables with his clever, rope-a-dope strategy, exhausting Foreman, and then in the 8th round, bam! Foreman hit the floor, and Ali reclaimed his heavyweight title. Then came Leon Spinks. In '78, Ali lost his title to this newcomer, but wouldn't let it lie. By September, in a fierce rematch, Ali won it back and made history as the first 3-time heavyweight champ. However, the story doesn't end there though. After a short-lived retirement, Ali laced up for a bout against Larry Holmes in 1980. But time and a tough opponent were against him. His light wasn't as bright, and Holmes won that night. After that, Ali fought one more fight, and his final curtain came in 1981 against Trevor Berbick. The man who floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee left the sport he revolutionized at the age of 39. Retirement was calling, and this time, Ali was ready to answer. After hanging up his gloves, Muhammad Ali didn't just fade into the shadows. Nope. He stepped into a different kind of spotlight, one that shone on the good you can do outside the ring. Ali became something of a champ for charity. He had a heart as big as his personality, supporting causes like the Special Olympics and the Make-A-Wish Foundation. But life threw more punches his way. In 1984, he shared with the world that he was battling Parkinson's disease. It was a tough opponent, stealing his mobility and that booming voice the world loved. The years that followed had their ups and downs. Ali went through surgeries like the one for spinal stenosis that tried to ease some of the pain and struggle. Then, in 2015, he took on pneumonia and a severe urinary tract infection, but the fighter in him never quit. On June 3, 2016, the news came that Ali had left the ring for the last time. In a hospital in Scottsdale, Arizona, with 74 years of fights, victories, and life, Muhammad Ali's final bell tolled. The world mourned, but oh how brightly his legacy shone, reminding everyone that a kid from Louisville could shake up the world. And that was the journey of the most inspirational fighter of all time. With an unrelenting warrior spirit, he stands up for what he believes in. Although he is not with us now, but the world would never forget the name Muhammad Ali, the GOAT of boxing.